first days when I was informed about this decree on women banning working in NGO, I was totally shocked. After this ban, I am not officially allowed to come to work to support other women and also to engage with my male colleagues. And this is really shocking for me. And also, I am the only breadwinner of my family. For me, as an Afghan women aid worker, it's really challenging and difficult to really digest this situation.
When I saw that letter in the social media, what? We're not allowed to work anymore? It means that there's no income anymore? I was not able to stop my tears for hours and hours. I was crying back to back, and I was trying to convince myself, no, it will change. Back before the ban, while we were designing any projects or programming, we used to do need assessment. Who did these need assessments? There was female aid workers. Are these women and girls able to come to the supervisor, who is a male, and talk about the safeguarding issue? Never. They are not allowed and they're not able to do that.
We have to ensure that we have enough female aid workers to reach female beneficiaries, to identify their needs, and also to make sure that they receive direct support from humanitarian aid. Temporarily, we can find different local solutions to reach women, maybe through different sources, but in long term, it will be difficult if this ban continues.
What I'm expecting from the global or international communities right now is to do not forget women and girls in Afghanistan. They need their support, they need their continuational negotiation and discussion with the authorities to make sure their rights are guaranteed, at least to bring changes in this decree to make female aid workers able to work, to provide support for both female aid workers and the beneficiaries who are receiving the services through humanitarian agencies. So don't stop, don't forget us, continue your negotiation and support us.
Don't forget us. Powerful words indeed. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our high-level session on the critical issue of the situation of women and girls in humanitarian crises, zooming in on Afghanistan. Now, for those of you at home watching on the stream, you will only have heard the sound, the audio of that video. By way of explanation, we decided it was important to protect the identity of those women featured in the video to not stream the video to you. I think that merely just sharing that underlines the importance of the discussion that we're going to have today. The level of risk, I'm hearing just someone's difficult to hear me. I'm going to grab one of those microphones. Some voice of God is telling me my microphone's not working very well. Is this one better? Oh, yes. Shocked me. The level of planning and risk involved in recording a video in Kabul of women doing their work should simply be unthinkable, but that is the reality, and it's something that is that we're going to discuss at length today with my illustrious panel next to me. Epic panel, 8 people. Let me go ahead and introduce all of them immediately. First of all, sitting next to me, we have the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, Ms. Anniken Huitfeldt, the Deputy Country Director for Afghanistan of Save the Children, Ms. Nora Hassineh, the Secretary General of CARE International, Ms. Sofia Sprechman-Sinero, a few chairs down. Next to Nora, the founder of Ashraq Home Schools in Afghanistan, Ms. Parasto Hakim. The UNICEF Executive Director, Ms. Catherine Russell, nearly at the end there, penultimate chair. the chair of the delegation for relations with Afghanistan, Mr. Petras Ostrovicius, and the Belgian Minister of Development Cooperation, Ms. Caroline Genet. And Caroline, I understand you have to leave us for an urgent meeting shortly, so don't be shocked if someone just exits the panel. She's not disappointed with us. She's just a very busy lady. Okay, I'd like to start by talking about the efficacy of a gender-based approach to humanitarian aid. Minister Whitfeldt, we got a little bit of a glimpse into that in that video that we just watched, but what is your take? Can you sort of make the case for why a gender-based approach to humanitarian aid?
Well, thank you so much, Akana, and thank to all the brave women that we just saw on the screen above us. I believe that in gender-divided societies, the gender perspective is even more important, simply because women and men are living different lives, so they have different needs. Norway is a very flexible donor, but in one area we are not very flexible, and this has to do with that we are not flexible concerning non-discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, and also ethnicity. To receive Norwegian funding, all humanitarian organizations must show how this perspective shapes their efforts. A clear gender perspective, therefore, also means that we must not reduce women and girls to victims. We saw it here. Women are leaders, they are employees, beneficiaries, and female staff are often essential to reach the most vulnerable.
But how do you avoid that? I mean, you mentioned the as it were, some of the criticisms of a gender-based approach to humanitarian work. Narrow, can lead to stereotyping, and focuses more on the kind of individual level intervention instead of a systems-based approach.
But
so how do you? What are the safeguards to prevent?
I think Afghanistan is a very, very gender divided society. So women are different, and we need to approach them differently. And we also certainly have to put them some criteria when this comes to our humanitarian efforts. So I am very happy that the international community has been able to agree on a framework on how to continue humanitarian and basic needs assistance. We will, of course, not replace women with men, and we support the humanitarian organization in their decisions to stay and deliver. I also want to comment on isolation, because I'm very often asked, why do you talk to the Taliban? Why don't you isolate them and punish them to take care of their own women? Well, I don't think that will work. When I invited women from different NGOs in Afghanistan, and I had a meeting with them, they told me very clearly, continue to be engaged. And we will continue also to talk with the Taliban. They are responsible for the welfare of the Afghan people, because isolation would likely lead to an even worse humanitarian crisis. Because history has taught us it is unwise to give up on Afghanistan. No one will benefit if the country descends into civil war or again becomes a base for terrorism.
Okay, I mean, forget the mic. It's you know, those are beautiful words, and I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with that.
Are you sure? I receive a lot of criticism because I still believe that engagement is the only way. Because very many foreign people who are involved in foreign policy, they are trying to display their way of being tough. And the strategy is isolation. So I think we really have to argue very strongly to continue engagement, even with those we disagree strongly with.
Okay, well, let's develop that point then. Let me develop that with Minister Genet from Belgium. this idea of this balancing act that I think NGOs and governments probably as well, absolutely, also have to do, deciding whether the greater good is helping as many people as possible, or indeed scaling back, because until there are human rights abuses, until the human rights abuses stop, for instance. What is your vision on that from a government perspective?
Keep talking. I think that has been said by my colleague, and the humanitarian principles in Afghanistan have been violated for years before, and now they are under threat in the most severe way thinkable. And in the beginning of February, I had a digital meeting with a couple of women and girls who worked, for instance, for Save the Children or the NRC in Afghanistan. And they said, well, we need the international community to stay engaged, but what we need even more is that we, as Afghan women, we can have a seat at the table in talking with our own government. Even if they don't respect us in who we are, it's us who they have to deal with, and we want to be implied in the discussions. And I think the most important thing is, as an international community, is that we speak also with one voice, even if we all have a different tone of voice, maybe from time to time. But I think it's important that we, on the one hand, strongly condemn that women cannot work, women cannot go to school, and that we won't be able to deliver on our humanitarian aid without women and girls. We won't reach them in the rural areas, so it's a danger to the Afghan people. But on the other hand, I think it's even more important that while we are United Nations and not always evenly united, that we come to condemning the ban, that we keep condemning the ban, and we keep saying it. Also with the Muslim countries, for instance, that we say it's not about religion, it's about human rights, it's about women's rights, and I think we have to come to one clear point, and that we have to be engaged in the conversation, but also in supporting the NGOs and the UN agencies.
And do you feel the international community is speaking at the moment with one cohesive voice with respect to Afghanistan?
It's difficult. Well, I met with Amina Mohammed when she came back from her trip to Afghanistan, and she said, well, we still have some work to do because, you have the humanitarian principles, neutrality, we want to be independently, we want to reach everyone. But on the other hand, we have to emphasize that gender mainstreaming, that stay away from gender discrimination, also in the activities on the field, they have to be made very clear. And the international community, to my feeling, from time to time, goes too slow in coming to what I see as an evident point of view, an evident standpoint to make. We continue to say this is not okay, we want you to lift the ban, dear Taliban, but on the other hand, we continue to be engaged also for the women and girls in the field, in the NGOs, in the schools, in the hospitals as help.
How does that work in practice? How can you engage the Taliban to lift the ban and do all the other things like empower women and girls who are, for the most part, literally stuck indoors? How do you do that in practice?
I think that's what they told me, at least, the women themselves. There is a big difference into the rural areas or the cities. In the cities, well, everyone makes his work going on or keep going on. In the rural areas, it's very hard. But there you have to talk to the local communities, and it's not evenly harsh everywhere, and that's the importance of the dialogue. While the emir might edit a decree, well, maybe not every local governor or mayor is evenly convinced by what has been decreed. So I think it's humanitarian work is always human work, And that's the most important thing, to stay engaged in the field, but as an international community, to have severe and harsh positions on condemning something as a ban for women to work.
And before you leave us, Caroline, you mentioned that that's something that you'd like to see the international community do better, speed, be more agile going forward. Is there something else, you know, a kind of call to action politically? What sort of, where would you like to see the willpower behind?
I think that gender mainstreaming is extremely important. I'm happy that there's at least next to the moderator one man in this panel. At least we wouldn't be doing justice to our principles. But I think that we have to make clear on all the regimes all over the world, especially those where humanitarian assistance is most needed, that where we fail women, we fail the economy. We fail social investments. We fail the future, and I think that's a message we have to keep on. We have to keep on telling to all leaders in the world.
It is. I think we should lead by example, though, because I mean this panel is strong, gender balance-wise. But we all saw, and you know, the comment of the Bulgarian minister this morning at the opening ceremony, the first 3 rows were pretty much white, above 60, male. So, you know, we need to you know, walk the walk as well, right?
Yes, we have to lead by example, and also in elections, I would say vote for a woman.
What a note to leave on. That's a kind of drop the mic moment. Thank you very much, Caroline. Okay, we've talked about what's going on in Afghanistan. Let's now talk to someone who is, you know, you just came back from there, Nora. Perhaps you can paint a picture for us as to how specifically the Taliban ban on women no longer being able to work in humanitarian aid has played out. How has that impacted your work?
Hi, thanks for that. Yeah, it was a big blow when the ban was announced. So to paint a picture a bit, it was December, so we were in one of the coldest winters in decades. Even in Kabul, we were at -17, really, really brutal. And facing one of the largest hunger crises we've ever seen. 20 million people facing crisis or emergency levels of hunger. Like, it's just incomprehensible, the scale of humanitarian need and the crisis. And then we get this news on Christmas Eve that then women can't work anymore for NGOs. That's, for us, that's 48% of my team. I had to take a very difficult decision. At the time, I was acting country director, to suspend all our programs because I thought temporarily until we understand what's happening. And that brought panic, obviously, in the team. What's happening? Save the Children leaving. We hear that we're leaving Afghanistan. I'm like, no, don't worry. We'll find a way out of this. Next day, we were called in for the humanitarian country team meeting, so with all the UN agencies and NGOs who participate. And the humanitarian community was deeply divided. We all had passionately different perspectives on what was the ethical way to move forward. We had been through this in 2021 when they first took over. They had banned women from working at that time. And it was possible for us to restart with women. And so we were saying, along with some other organizations, it's really important that we don't abandon our female colleagues, we don't abandon female beneficiaries at a time of such immense humanitarian crisis. It will be possible to program in a principled way. Then also with communities, when this ban came about, they were also super stressed, naturally. I mean, we had a meeting with some widows who we support, who were so scared, saying, if there's no women in your team, I mean, I think it was said in the video earlier, who's going to come and do the assessment? I'm not going to make it onto a beneficiary list. I need this to survive. So they were very stressed. Thankfully, though, we knew we could get through this. We engaged deeply in access negotiations at all levels. So national level, village level, communities came out. So we had really, really impressive fathers in one of the villages in a very, very conservative part of the country had come out to say, this activity has to continue. We really need women in this program. And they went and petitioned for us, and we were able to restart. I can say now we've restarted around 87% of our programming with full participation of female staff in every province where we work.
How are you
sectors.
doing that? How is that possible?
So it's very precarious. This whole situation is fragile, but it's important that people know it is possible in Afghanistan to work. Because, as was said, Afghanistan historically is not the most hierarchical of societies. Yes, there's a statement from the Emir, but then I think it was said earlier by a Belgian colleague, that doesn't necessarily translate into everybody's views. Even within the Taliban, there's so many different views. And so we were able to negotiate at a provincial level, local level, village level, to say, the people desperately need these activities and understand that, of course, they don't want their wife to be seen by a male gynecologist. They don't want their daughter to be taught by a male teacher. There's a lot of sympathy for the widows, especially widows of war, and they know they need assistance, and they can't have a men doing distributions for them. So there is that understanding within the community, and so we've been able to negotiate. And
do you feel you've had the support that you need from the international community? It's such a diffuse kind of container word, but...
I'd say it's been mixed. To big up ECHO and the EU. Actually, the ECHO is the only in-country donor, and they've been amazing and super supportive in many, many ways. Really, really great having their presence, and I really hope more donors and political bodies come back to Afghanistan. It's not so bad. Please come back. So they've been helpful. Also, there's been people who've been very unhelpful. Some of these big statements saying, we're going to suspend aid, we're going to stop funding assistance to Afghanistan in solidarity with women. Like, my female colleagues are really tired of different sides weaponizing them to make political statements. On both sides, right? The Taliban uses them to make a political statement. Different governments of people who are here use them to make political statements to justify stopping assistance during a time of immense humanitarian need, which doesn't help any Afghan woman. And so they're really, really tired of being this proxy war for people who don't want to just talk to each other and deal, it's not, what they said, it's not even really about them. It's like, the Taliban don't really care about us. I don't really think these governments care about us, but they use us to hurt each other, and ultimately it hurts people in Afghanistan. Like now, 4 in 10 children are facing acute malnutrition. Like, it's overwhelming, the needs there. And I think we all need to do a lot more to be programming in a principled way. It's possible to do it. And refocusing efforts. So not using all of this as an excuse to disengage and abandon Afghanistan. I think that was a clear message from the video. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to bring in your neighbor, Prasto Hakim. Prasto, you recently came from Afghanistan yourself, where you set up a network of schools, I understand. Nora's just mentioned it. Do you feel like you were a political football?
Hello, everyone. Would you mind if I take my time and talk generally about what is exactly going on in Afghanistan nowadays?
Please do, yes.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming here. We have been to many of these kind of forums, fortunately. The world leaders, I am not pointing out to anybody here, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but the things that we are hearing these nowadays in 1.5 years, this is absolutely not true. Many world leaders are coming to me and they are telling me that Afghanistan is safe now. There is no war and war has stopped. What do you exactly expect? Do you want the Taliban blow themselves in Kandahar while their leader is in a mosque and they are not allowed to see their faces? Do you what exactly do you mean? They have to blow themselves again in the jihadi schools that they are making and replacing it with the exact schools that we had. Each year, these days and these nights, exactly in this night that we are gathering here to talk about the catastrophe in Afghanistan, people in Afghanistan was preparing 2 years back about New Year Eve, and they were preparing their haft mewa and their new clothes to welcome the new year. And in the same time, the students would have prepared themselves for the new educational year, which is basically on the second day of the new year. But the Taliban, a few days back, they have banned the New Year celebration. And they said, whomever we have caught that they are celebrating the New Year, we are going to punish/kill them. At the same time, each year at this time, the government would prepare an event in which, in the second day of the New Year, they will ring a bell where it was a kind of a sign of the starting of New Year for education and the schools for the girls and boys who are going to school. And each and every kids inside their household would have been happy about their new clothes, new stationaries, and the new year that they are going to start again. But nowadays they are all heartbroken, they are hopeless, and with such world leaders, we are helpless. In the last 1.5 years, we have always been talking about what exactly is going on in Afghanistan, the people who are not going to receive aid, the assistance and everything. Let me remind something to the dear world. When the Taliban came first, on the first 6 months, we had 18 million people who were waiting for the, I'm not an expert, but this is what was coming in the figures back then from the world. We had 18 million people who, 8 million people who were waiting in the lines to receive food assistance, which nowadays, after 1.5 years and few months, this number is 23 million people waiting in the lines to get killed because they do not have food to receive. And we have always been talking about this, that what is going on in political side and everything. Imagine you're a girl and you're 13 years old, you're just going to the 7th grade and now you are not allowed to go to school anymore, and your father is a street laborer and you are in the family, you are 7 members. You have seven members in your family, excuse my English. And your father is a street laborer, again, and he is, on daily basis, he's just receiving $2 each day to bring food to the table for that big family. He is unable to support his family. And the biggest thing he is going to do is he has to get rid of some members of the family. How? The girls who cannot go to school anymore, they are ready to get married because there is a responsibility on the shoulders of that man who cannot feed the entire family. So he is forcing his daughter, who is just 13 years old, to get married. And then she have to say yes because she do not have any other purpose. She cannot go to school. She do not have any future. So they just have to feed them until she is 18 years old and she get married. So why not now when she is 13 years old? And then she have to get married. She have to deliver a baby in a rural area where there is no hospital, and she might get killed because woman is nothing. The least the world is talking about allowing women to go and work is like the Taliban cannot allow their women to go to a male doctor. Really? Are we talking about allowing women to go out and work just because the Taliban women need female doctors? Aren't they humans. What are about the human rights that we are speaking about? Is it all a lie when it comes to Afghanistan, or it is just a dramatic thing? And we are just pulling on our politics about that. So, yeah.
Parasto, I mean, yeah, it feels, I don't know, it's kind of inappropriate cutting you short, but I would love to know, because you've been there firsthand, you've set something up from nothing, you created a network, and now presumably you're based over here. I don't know if is that network still alive? Is it still able to function, let alone thrive?
Yes. So in September 2021, when the Taliban first came, they just came. When Afghanistan was handed over to the Taliban, we started our network. We started with first school inside an area that today I'm wearing their clothes. They're Hazara people. They are the most educated people inside Afghanistan, and they were most targeted inside the schools, and their blood is still on the desks and the walls of the schools while they have been targeted inside the schools. And now the world is just saying that it doesn't matter, we just need the female doctors. So we started our school, the first school there, and after that we moved to other schools. Right now we have 9 schools across Afghanistan with 300 girls from the secondary till higher, and in the same time we have 150 women who were not able to go to school in 1996 in the first period of the Taliban, of course, and they are coming to us to learn literacy program under the Second Chance program that we think we provided. And in the same time, as Nora said, when the world was in Christmas Eve, we have received another verdict when they banned the girls from going to university. So we built up our first online university. We cannot really call it a university. It's really a big deal. But we have online sessions for the female university girls that they are learning there.
Okay. Now that's great news. It's fantastic that that's still going and still thriving. But I think it's clear we can all feel the anger, the frustration. You feel let down. I'd love to hear from Sofia Sinero. You're still active in Afghanistan. Has CARE been able to maintain business as usual, or have you also had to adjust?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this very esteemed panel. And business as usual, of course not. That is simply not possible when there's an edict that is banning many women from working. But on the other hand, of course, there's, as we just heard, 28 million people in need, 6 million people a step away from famine-like conditions. So this is a moment where actually 2 very critical principles for humanitarian response clash. That's humanity and impartiality. In order to be impartial, we need female staff in order to be able to do proper safeguarding and quality work. It's absolutely essential to, of course, work with women. And it's, of course, also the right of women. It's both. It's effective and it is a right. But while it's not business as usual, we have found some workarounds. We have found some ways. It's very important to state that actually for education and health, there are exemptions. So women can work in education and in health programs. And a lot can fit under education. For example, school feeding programs. You can be quite creative in terms of how much you expand what health and education may mean. So there is that possibility. As Nora also said, we in every province, it may look slightly different, and therefore, nurturing those relationships at provincial, community level is so very essential. And of course, programs may restart here and then next week close. So you must actually provide all decision-making power to staff locally to know when to stop and go and use every opportunity possible. We are together with UN Women, CARE, is co-chairing the Gender in Humanitarian Actions Group, and that's precisely where we discuss all of these creative solutions. I was in Afghanistan as part of the ISC mission led by Martin Griffiths to precisely talk about this ban in January. And actually my most inspiring meeting of all was with 8 Afghan leaders of Afghan NGOs that actually said to us, there's always a way. You have to flow like water. You have to be like a mouse. You have to always find a way. And if those Afghan women find a way, how can we not? In fact, we must be there to support them, to support their work.
Yeah, flowing like a river and being as quiet as a mouse aren't descriptions I would usually associate with international huge NGOs. These are machines. So are you, is this a kind of battle cry for people to redesign how their processes and how they deliver humanitarian aid?
Yes, we have to find all of those opportunities within the exceptions. We, of course, have to be calling for further exceptions beyond health and education. That continues to also be. We must continue pushing. I fully agree with the minister and what she just said. We shouldn't just stop at that. So there must be continued pressure to expand the possibilities for our humanitarian work, but we must be creative. I think actually the words of the day are creativity, as the women-led organizations in Afghanistan are showing us. Unity I very much agree, unity of the international community. We must be in this together. And in fact, I'm very grateful to donors that have shown flexibility and have accompanied us in our attempt to be adaptable and flexible. So creativity, unity, adaptability. I mean, the world is not getting any easier in many parts of the world. If we cannot be creative and adaptable and flexible, we may also find in other contexts that it will be very, very, very hard to work. So I would say, here what we need is to really focus on women-led organizations, not to leave them at this very dire moment. In fact, this may be the moment in Afghanistan's history that is the most critical to be in support of women and girls and of women-led organizations. If not now, when?
Yeah. Before I go to, I think that's worth a round of applause. Before I go to Ms. Russell, though, I would love to get a sense of one of the creative ways that you've found to deliver humanitarian aid effectively, briefly.
Well, for example, within in health clinics, because in health, again, women can work and it's allowed, or in education. In health clinics, we have restarted our mobile health clinic programs. We often just work very sectorally, very kind of in a tubular way in our sector, in either education or health. But in health clinics, there is no reason why you cannot provide a meal. In health clinics, there is no reason why you cannot provide a blanket. In schools, there is no reason why you cannot provide food as well. So I think what it demands from us as an international community is actually go out of our very sectoral, tubular ways of working and be as creative as Afghan women are and Afghan men are. I mean, there is no other way. And you're so right. Tomorrow is actually New Year's Day, Nowruz, Persian New Year in Afghanistan. And it's so complex to hear what you just told us about, that celebrations are not allowed. I mean, even more so must be doubled down to work in unity, not in a megaphone way, but in unity, in togetherness with Afghan women and girls to continue building a better future.
Okay. Ms. Russell, Sophia mentioned it herself, the importance of a principled approach, but what are the prospects of maintaining a principled approach to humanitarian aid if the Taliban ban is not reversed?
Well, I think that the way to look at it is we have a humanitarian crisis, and as you've heard here, 28 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. It's an extraordinary problem. I saw it myself. I saw babies on the verge of starvation. I saw a family subsisting on bread and water and potatoes if the husband managed to get a little bit of work. I mean, this is a very difficult humanitarian challenge. The problem, I think, is that we are having a conflation of the political challenges and the humanitarian. And that is very unhealthy because there needs to be a political channel where not the humanitarian operators, but others are trying to figure out some kind of solution to this problem. And because that doesn't really exist, it's all coming on the backs of the humanitarians, where they're saying to the humanitarian operators, don't do this, don't do that, how can you sustain this? Well, we will always do that. We will do everything we possibly can to help the women and children, at least on UNICEF's side, in Afghanistan for as long as we can, and we will find any way to do it that we possibly can. That is the principle that we stand by. Now, there are some pieces of that are important, which is to say that we don't deliver services in a discriminatory way, right? We don't participate in that, but we will find ways, and it's been described here, there have just been a lot of ways to carve out space where we can provide services, and as long as we can do that in a way that is consistent with our values. So as an example of what we wouldn't do, we don't support secondary schools in Afghanistan because girls can't go to secondary schools. We support community-based education. We find other ways to get around that so that we're not doing something that's inconsistent with our views, but we're still trying to find every way we can to help the population.
In terms of, you said the mission is to provide help to Afghan children any way possible. I'm thinking of, how broadly interpretable is that? I mean, there are some people who call for a more people-centered approach to humanitarian aid. I'm thinking of, for instance, offering or financing vocational courses that would be for men and boys in order to take the kind of funnel away from the Taliban of future fighters. Is that something, obviously that can have the consequence of helping women and girls, but is that something to consider?
For UNICEF, it's slightly easier because we have children, and so that is our mission, is to try to support children and women. So we're not really getting into these questions of would we support men in different activities. I think that the really difficult situation in Afghanistan, from my perspective, is every single thing that has been done in the last year has further constrained the space for women and girls, right? It's every decision they've made has been negative for women and girls. And so I think that, as I said, the political pressure needs to keep coming on them. But I think for us, I think most humanitarians are optimistic people, otherwise they wouldn't be in this business. But I can't say that I'm feeling very optimistic that they're going to suddenly wake up and say, oh, we're okay now with women participating, we're okay with girls participating. I don't think that's going to happen. So maybe it will, hopefully it will, but I think in the meantime we have to find ways to do our work.
Okay. We've had calls for creativity, agility, speed. Let me go to our European parliamentarian. Petras, what is the European Parliament doing to help stimulate these requests for faster help, more creative help, being more agile? What can you do from your position, you and your colleagues?
Good evening to everybody, and thank you, the European Humanitarian Forum, for taking up the situation of Afghan women, girls, and situation in general in Afghanistan. Let me to offer you some thoughts in this regard, what the European Parliament is doing and what could be the priorities for our common action in future as well, because we will need time to fix the situation, let's be frank. So we have to be very serious from the very start. Firstly, we have to keep focus on Afghanistan. Agree there is no lack for regional or global challenges worldwide. Starting from food security, military situations, security, all kind of. So, but we have to be focused on Afghanistan continuously. It's easy to, to leave Afghanistan for itself, to forget. But if we do it, will be no return, will be no easy return. The situation will get even more complicated. We have no right to forget the achievements of the past 20 years. 20 years means a new generation. We raised that generation together with Afghan governments. I mean, in not necessarily every time easy and effective cooperation, but nevertheless, look how many good results are, pronounced and remembered in Afghanistan about our cooperation. So that's why it's not a choice. Focus politically means to consider situation, to come back to analysis and decision-making when it's needed and possible. Secondly, I strongly believe in Afghanistan's better future. And we have to think about better future even now. How? For example, giving visas for Afghan young people to get education. Once believing, they will be back to Afghanistan when situation allows, or maybe even now in the fields of healthcare and education, and to improve situation, to stabilize situation. So that's why, to focus on future decisions, not necessarily easy now when you see so many restrictions and constraints, but it's possible when thinking is socially innovative and technologically possible. For example, even online education could be and probably should be expanded to Afghanistan where there is a possibility. The third probably item is we have to acknowledge that will be a huge need for financial support, for humanitarian support to be channeled to Afghanistan. And we are speaking about 28 or so million people. And we are speaking about the kind of lifeline, not just improving situation by 10% or 20%. No, it's a matter of survival. So that's why the European Parliament is really focused on providing so needed financial resources in our annual EU budget, and through the EU budget appropriate instruments to provide financial and more humanitarian assistance to the needs of Afghan people, employing and using international channels, different NGOs who really assist us in this regard. And finally, still, we know, what the Taliban system is about. We call present situation as a gender genocide. And in most instances, it's really true. And we have to be very serious and ready, when it's possible, to take targeted restrictive measures or sanctions against those officials of Taliban who are responsible for those undertakings. I know, it's sometimes very unpopular, to impose sanctions on those with whom you have very little of contacts. Indeed, we have only operational contacts from the EU side with Taliban, but still, it matters. Those officials, they really feel being hurt by our decisions, so that's why let's be brave enough and effective enough, on one side, assisting as much as we can in present situation, extending our assistance in looking at future perspective, but again, restricting life for those who are responsible for that.
Yeah. Before I go to the audience for some questions, Nora, I would love you to reflect on something Petros just said. Do the Taliban really care about sanctions? I saw you pull a bit of a face at that point. Is that really where we're at? Is that effective at this stage?
Fine, that's a tricky question.
Oh.
Let me think how I can answer that.
How do you do this? I think we have our answer, to be honest.
I mean, I think I don't know. I think sanctions, as much as we try, and I think they're done with really good intentions, and it is, I mean, there's very few tools, where there isn't genuine political engagement, meaningful political engagement, then the tools we have are really limited, and hence why I understand why sanctions are put out. But often the people who suffer the most end up not really being the authorities, but Afghan people and the most vulnerable. If we look at the economic collapse, which is in part as a result of sanctions on Afghanistan, this has made the humanitarian crisis just beyond what any humanitarian actor can deal with. It's so immense, and making every other issue in Afghanistan, especially the ones we heard around child marriage and abuse, and just all these things so much worse. I think we really need to see more engagement, and there needs to be another avenue, I think, as was said earlier, for these political battles to take place, and so that they stop happening through humanitarian assistance, because it feels it's very cruel weaponizing aid to make a point at another political leader in both directions. I'm not saying that that's what's happened here with those particular sanctions, and I know that the intention is really good, but it's I think what would be helpful is to see more engagement, so that there's other avenues for some of these debates to take place.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the engagement, to make that concrete?
I think there needs to be political and economic engagement with the authorities, that isn't via humanitarian assistance.
Right.
So at the moment, country X wants to show their anger at the Taliban by then withholding humanitarian aid or suspending humanitarian aid. Taliban really, that doesn't hurt them. That hurts the millions that we're trying to assist who are dependent on aid for survival. The Taliban wants to make a point at a Western government, so they'll, hurt NGOs. We have to remember, this ban was on NGO workers. It wasn't a ban on women working. It was a ban on NGO workers. It's very specific to target all the people in this room, right? To make a point to people here. And while there isn't other forums for them to make those points, will get used to make those points. And actually who gets hurt are Afghan people and the most vulnerable.
Back to the political football.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. First of all, we've got two specific questions in the audience. I'd like to first hear from Ismat Jahan, who is from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and you're an ambassador to the EU. If I can get this, I'm going to come into the audience. I think that's easiest. Hi, Ismat. Would you like to stand? What would you like to say?
In fact, it's more than a question. I'd like to make a brief intervention on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Go ahead. I'm going to let go of the mic.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be more comfortable to have a seat. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for this opportunity to make a brief intervention on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And Ambassador Tariq Baki, the Special Envoy of the OIC Secretary General, would have very much liked to be part of this panel. In fact, he was invited, but for unforeseen circumstances, he could not join us today. The discussion so far has been really heavy, but at the same time thought-provoking, because while we don't see an immediate light at the end of the tunnel, but we must remain optimists by engaging in various ways with the de facto authorities. This is what I think I have learn from all those who have taken in the panel, who have taken the floor. It's now over a year and a half that has elapsed since there has been a regime change in Kabul. And the humanitarian situation in the country has gone from bad to worse. I mean, this has already been said, and it's for me only to reaffirm. And child malnutrition, the lingering ramification of COVID-19 pandemic, the dysfunctional health system, and an economy near the point of collapse, if not already collapsed, are the hallmark of a humanitarian catastrophe in the making. And we truly support the need for an gendered approach for humanitarian aid, not only in Afghanistan, but beyond, in other circumstances. That's what the OIC believes in. In its determined efforts to help mitigate the worsening situation in Afghanistan, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has remained engaged. Again, I'm highlighting on the word engaged with the country and with its present de facto authorities, and responding to the aggravating humanitarian situation, a special humanitarian fund, trust fund for Afghanistan, has been established recently. I mean, it's now a little over a year ago. And mobilization endeavors for the trust fund are being maintained. And to this end, the Secretary General of the OIC has called on the international humanitarian community to develop a synergistic humanitarian approach through which our respective efforts could be brought together. So it need not be piecemeal, but together we can achieve something, at least. Notably, only a few days ago, there was a Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC meeting in Mauritania, and the OIC Secretary General has reaffirmed that the OIC's humanitarian aid will continue. And we thank the member states of the OIC who have already contributed to the Humanitarian Trust Fund.
Ismet,
And I will come to an end. Oh,
I'm sorry, say again?
Yes, I will come
Wonderful,
soon. Yes,
wonderful.
But please do bear with me because I am, in a way, representing
Absolutely, no, it's
Ambassador Tariq
very
Baki
important.
here.
I appreciate that. It's just we have questions
and-
on Slido and in the audience.
Afghanistan being a member state of the OIC, I think, we do have a special responsibility also. But let me just say that top of the humanitarian challenges that we are seeing, what we have seen is the last blow, one of the last blow to women's fundamental right to unimpeded access to the humanitarian aid. As we all know that the decree was issued which banned Afghan women from working in the NGOs. In the immediate aftermath, the OIC had expressed its grave concern over the ban, which came hard on the heels of an earlier ban barring Afghan girls and women from accessing universities. The OIC had denounced these decisions, and I would say that in our engagement, the OIC had called on the de facto authorities to revisit these decisions, and we, at the same time, maintain an open dialogue with the de facto authorities, which is very important, as others have noted. And in the last visit by the OIC Special Envoy, he has also raised the point. It was very early in March.
I'm going to come over here.
He has, on the girls' education.
In person, that
Yes.
I'm going to move on.
Okay,
just because
just one sentence. Let me
one
finish
sentence?
it once.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He has raised, sorry, and thank you for this. He has raised this issue. And as I promised, one sentence, I would say that would be, we believe that no single entity or institution can unilaterally address the humanitarian challenges only a stable and sustainable economy, together with inclusive political governance, would be able to secure the future we and certainly the Afghans are aspiring for. Thank you very much.
It's a very long last sentence. Whoever wrote that drafting, I'm not sure about the punctuation. Okay, there is one more question. There is a question I do have to take. That is from Ms. Dijke Potzel. Dijke? Yes, please, go ahead.
Short intervention and question for Parasto. But short intervention. I wanted to pick up on the video that we saw at the beginning and to say, like last year, Germany was one of the biggest donors also for Afghanistan for humanitarian assistance. And I want to strongly underline the fact we will stay engaged. We will stay committed to the people of Afghanistan, particularly to the women of Afghanistan and the girls and the children. The question is how much principled humanitarian assistance will be possible. And I also want to underline that we have to be very clear in calling out those who are responsible for putting us in this corner, for creating those problems, and for destroying the future of so many women and girls in Afghanistan, and that is the Taliban. And I think we should always make that point very, very clearly. So that is why we are going to fund humanitarian assistance where women can work and where women and children can be reached. And I'm very happy that there is international consensus on that. Now, question, Parasto. You didn't, I think, have the time to tell us what are your expectations of the international community. You were pretty critical. So what are your expectations? But if I may add, what are your expectations of the Afghan civil society and of the Afghan population? Because in all fairness, what I keep wondering is, when there are these brave women taking to the streets in Kabul, where are their husbands and fathers and brothers? And do you expect them to be out there with them, or what are your expectations?
Thank you very much. Parasto.
Thank you very much. In fact, while I'm here talking about the rights of millions of girls inside Afghanistan, I did not have the right to talk my 10 minutes about Afghanistan. So here
I feel like the bad guy. I'm
asking
so
for my
sorry.
right of 10 minutes because I have so many things to say, if you allow me.
You do.
But I have long sentences.
But we have lots of people who would love to ask you questions.
But let them know what is exactly going on to ask the questions and be courageous.
Perhaps you can first deal specifically with that question. What are your just to be solutions focused?
I am going to say that, but before that, I have to say the whole thing which is going on, and you have to let me take my 10 minutes.
Okay.
Now the whole people are with me and you're alone.
There's even a chair in between us. I'm completely ostracized.
No, I want to tell the whole world what is going on. I can talk to you in the background then.
Okay. Go ahead, Parasto.
So I am not going to go to the whole sentences, the long sentences, just because of you. I am doing this favor for you.
Oh. Thank you.
This is the picture of two girls standing in front of their school that they cannot go tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. First, this is the picture of the boys, boys who are going to be jihadists and fundamentalists, and they are going to be terrorists inside the shadow of the Taliban regime. And about this, I have a short thing that I have to tell you all. We have always been talking about what are the girls going. They are being forced to get married. They are going to be killed. They are going to commit suicide. Many of them have people like me and all of these great people who are helping them to access education. But what exactly are the boys doing inside Afghanistan? The small boys who are going to that schools that the Taliban are running. So when the Taliban came to the power, they have brought so many extreme changes in the educational system of Afghanistan, starting from they have determined and they have fired the teachers and educated staff from the education administrations. We have been closely in contact with the families of the male children who are going to the schools, male students, and also with the teachers and the institutions. So when we have also found this out that the interest of going to school among these children have decreased to very low level. My colleague here, she said that we are always connecting something to the politics while it is humanitarian. So in my country, the people are not allowed to work while they're educated, and the Taliban, who have never been to school at all, they are going to replace them, and they do not have anything to do. They have to stand in the line of the humanitarian helps and assistance. That is why I am connecting everything to the politics, because the situation in my country is like that. So we wanted to find out what exactly is going on. So in this track, in my foundation or in our organization, we have analyzed some of the data from the verdicts where the leader of the Taliban is putting out, and also the speeches of the Ministry of Education and the Higher Education. I'm going so fast for you. So we have a verdict here. I have a verdict of the Ministry of Education of the Taliban, in which they have fired all the educated staff, and they have put their own Taliban people instead of them. There are many of them, like 30 people, like more than 25 people, and 525 people have been there in the education administrations and special education ministry of Afghanistan. So what are they doing with that? And how they are functioning, and what is going on inside the schools of the boys? So here, in one of the verdicts which have come out in 17 March last year, the leaders of the Taliban, who nobody have seen him, by the way, he just have a small passport kind of picture, he have had a verdict out in which he have said that they are going to start establishing 3 to 10 jihadi schools. Everybody know jihadi schools meaning? Yes. The fundamentalists schools all across Afghanistan, and in each district of Afghanistan, they want to start 3 to 10 jihadi schools or madrasas. So in this verdict, the Taliban leaders said that each teacher's salary is going to be, first of all, they are going to have 10 teachers. They are going to have 8 staffs, and in each season, they want to graduate 500 to 1,000 students from that extremist, fundamentalist, and jihadi schools. So let's talk about that. Each teacher will have 25,000 Afghanis salary, and each teacher who is practically telling the small children on how to blow themselves, how to use the vest and everything, because they are doing jihad. Their salary is 20,000 Afghanis. While in the same time, the students who are going to that schools, they will have food, they will have shelter, and in the same time, they will, on the daily basis, they are going to be paid 150 Afghanis, which in USD dollars, it is $2, I think. So here, the information that it has reached to us, it shows that the salaries that they are giving is the double of the salary that in the previous government the teachers were receiving. So our teachers were, the teachers who have been taught me in the schools, they were receiving 9,000 Afghanis. They were educated, but these teachers, they are not educated, they just went to madrasas. So here, let's start a small kind of, how to say, let's do census on what is going on now. So Afghanistan has 421 districts, With a rough calculation, let's just do a calculation. If we assume that the Taliban built an average of 6 jihadi schools in each of the districts, it will be soon 2,526 madrasas, and about 25,000 people will be working there as teachers, and 20,000 people will be staff in that jihadi schools. And in each session that they are going to graduate 500 to 1,000 people. So soon there will be 1,263,000 small terrorists graduated from that schools. What are they doing, and where are they going to blow themselves up? Let me tell you that one as well. I'm being so...
Now, if you could really round. I'm nervous.
Absolutely.
I'm nervous.
Just in the last one. Just
okay.
in the last one, yeah. It's like a movie, right?
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the salary of each Sheikh al-Hadith, who is the teacher of these schools, are several times the salary of the soldiers of the previous government. Do you think that these jihadi schools will not be a favorable and a peaceful platform for the international terrorism and the terrorists? On the other hand, the Taliban have majorly made a new, they are planning to make a new generation of fundamentalist forces in the region through these jihadi schools. I warn you all, if you do not act now, if we do not act now, and if the world stays silent as they do right now, these forces will soon become a great challenge to the peace in the world, and especially in the region, and especially to the European countries. There is not much line between the ideology of the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and ISK, I don't know many other names, and the Taliban. So these children in Afghanistan, the small children, which is the future generation of my country, and they are going to build the future of Afghanistan as well. They are being taught about these ideologies, and soon they are going to be a major threat today, tomorrow, and every other day. Let's assume if one of them come to an European countries and attacked, all those who ignored the threats will pay the price, and they are going to be responsible for that.
Very clear. Parazzo, I'm going to stop you there. Thank you, because there's a very stark and robust and clear warning for all of us. Thank you. I hope my daughter grows up to be half as strong and powerful and stubborn and wonderful as you are. So it's very good. Thank you very much. Nora, perhaps you can speak briefly to the question that was posed. Your expectation of what... let's go to Nora, just to hear from someone else. What would you expect? What would you like to see from Afghani men and fathers? We already heard from Sophia, for instance, that fathers played an important role, but what would you like to see from them?
I guess it's not my place so much to say, but I mean, I think to share, even if it doesn't make the news, we are seeing really impressive things. Like some of our programs restarted because fathers demanded. We have a program called Girls Learn to Teach, which supports young women to become teachers. And when the ban happened, and that was paused, so now we have an exemption for education. There was a time where there wasn't. We were able to restart that activity because fathers really demanded that there's exemptions for those programs. So we saw when girls were prevented from going to university, the boys held protests and were beaten severely, but they still went out, and students said that they wouldn't go to, male students said they wouldn't go until their female colleagues could come back to university. We saw men, scholars, refuse to continue teaching until their female students could come back. Yes, it's maybe not at the scale that some of us would love to see, but it's happening, and I think it's very, very brave somewhere like Afghanistan where the punishments are next level. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it is happening. And we need more of it. I don't know if we've got time for questions from Slido or in the audience. Perhaps someone can tell me in my ear. In the meantime, let me take one question from the audience. Well, oh, that hand shot up extremely quickly. Okay, I'm going to come over to you. Perhaps you can walk to the edge. A very brief question, please. I'm hearing we need to wrap up.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the excellent intervention. My name is Rashad. I'm from the European Council on Refugees and Exile. My question goes to Madam Director from UNICEF. While we have heard the humanitarian needs on the ground, like around 28 million people, I was wondering to ask, what are the funding gaps, and will there be a donor conference on Afghanistan to collect humanitarian assistance? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's such an important question. We have Afghanistan as part of our broader humanitarian appeal. We are able to mobilize some resources, but we definitely need a lot more because, as I said at the outset, the needs are so immense. And I think, as you heard here today, it's such a dire situation. And I think while we are able to help, and there are limits on our ability to help because of the terrible situation we're in, it shouldn't be a problem of lack of funding. And I do think that it's a place where the international community really can come together and try to show some support for the women and children who really desperately need it.
And to the second part of the question, wondering if there's going to be a donor conference specific to this issue.
I'm looking at my, no, I think, as I said, we did a broader humanitarian appeal, and Afghanistan was part of it. As far as I know, there's not a separate one, but that's not unusual.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm being told, apologies to everyone watching on the stream, we have to wrap it up here. We've gone already a little bit over time. I can't imagine why. I don't know what happened. Thank you very much, everybody. It's clear that a lot needs to happen. Maybe we should be more impatient. Impatience, I think, is a bit of an underrated virtue. We should embrace that. A lot of very concrete ideas have been shared, but I think the one above all is we need to stay engaged. The international community must stay engaged, and we need to keep talking in order to ensure that women and girls in Afghanistan aren't in as precarious and vulnerable position as they are. Thank you very much, everybody. All the best.